My family skipped my 8-year-old son's emergency surgery, then demanded $10,000 for my brother's Vegas party. I cut them off, froze every account, and when they tried to ruin my name, I walked into court with proof they'd been robbing me for years. Hey, Reddit. My family treated me like their personal ATM for years. When I finally cut them off, they lost their minds. But that's not even the craziest part. Let me take you back to where it all started. My name's Jack Rains, 34, owner of Iron Ridge Garage on the east side of Milwaukee. I'm a former Marine, now a single dad. My 8-year-old son, Luke, is the best thing I've ever built. His mom moved 3 states away after the divorce. Most days, it's just me and him. School in the morning, shop in the afternoon, dinner at the same table every night. My family's close enough to drive over. Aside from the odd night my dad watched Luke, they only called when they needed something. Saturday afternoon, Luke was playing Little League. Sun high, dust in the air, kids laughing. Then came the crack of the bat, a line drive straight to his head. The world stopped. He dropped like a puppet with the strings cut. The next 15 minutes were a blur. I had him in the truck. One hand gripping the wheel, the other steadying his head. The ER was 15 minutes away. I made it in 7. Inside the emergency room, everything smelled like bleach and adrenaline. I signed the forms while nurses cut off Luke's jersey. The doctor said possible skull fracture and disappeared behind double doors. I just nodded. Marines are trained to keep it together. Panic wastes time. I called everyone while waiting. First Mom, no answer. Then Dad went to voicemail. Then my brother Ryan sent straight to busy. I texted Luke's in the ER, head injury. Please come. Nothing. An hour passed. The nurse brought coffee that tasted like copper. The doctor returned, said they were prepping Luke for a minor operation to drain pressure. I nodded again, said, "Do it." My throat was dry, but my voice stayed steady. 2 hours later, I sat alone in the waiting area. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should. Across from me, another family huddled together, mother crying, father holding her, grandparents whispering. I looked at them and felt something break. When the surgeon finally came out, his gloves still creased, he said, "Your boy's going to be okay." It hit like a punch, relief and exhaustion in one breath. They let me see Luke an hour later. He was small under the blankets, IV in his arm, breathing steady. I brushed his hair back, whispered, "You're good, buddy. You're tougher than me." The nurse asked, "Anyone coming to stay with you?" I said, "Guess not." By midnight, the hospital quieted. I sat beside his bed with my back against the wall, hands clenched until my old scars ached. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, I went to the vending machine, bought black coffee, and scrolled my phone. The last 10 texts from my family were all the same. "Can you loan us $2,000? Ryan's business just needs a little boost. We'll pay you back next month. Nothing about birthdays, nothing about Luke." The nurse dimmed the lights and I stared at the floor tiles until morning. Luke woke up just before sunrise, groggy smile. "Hey, Dad. Hey, champ. You scared me half to death." He grinned weakly. "Did we win?" I laughed once. "Yeah, you knocked it out of the park." He fell asleep again and I exhaled for the first time in hours. We were discharged the following afternoon. I carried him to the truck, head wrapped, one arm around my neck. The nurse handed me papers and said, "Follow up next week." I nodded and loaded him in gently. Back home, I tucked him on the couch with his dinosaur blanket and cartoons. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I turned my phone on silent, left it face down on the counter. That night, while Luke slept, I walked out to the garage. The smell of oil and cold steel felt like home. I leaned on the workbench, staring at the tools hanging neatly in a row. Everyone earned by my own hands, not a single one gifted. I checked my phone just once before bed. Still nothing from family. 3 days later, it buzzed. Mom, glad Luke's okay. Ryan and his fiancée Mia need $10,000 for his Vegas bachelor trip. You can spot him, right? Family helps family. The same number that had ignored every message from the hospital. The same people who couldn't be bothered to send a "how's he doing?" I read it twice, $10,000 for a trip. I opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and popped the tab. The hiss filled the room. The first sip burned down my throat, bitter and cold. I scrolled back through her message, the little heart at the end. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have written a paragraph, told her what it felt like watching Luke unconscious under hospital lights. Told her how I'd sat alone for 12 hours waiting for a single call that never came. Instead, I didn't type a word. I set the phone down, looked at Luke sleeping on the couch, and whispered, "Don't worry, kid, I got us." Then I stared at the wall until the clock hit midnight. When the phone buzzed again, it was another message from Mom. "Please answer. The deposit's due today. Ryan says you're doing well. You make good money at that garage. Don't be selfish." I cracked another beer. The fizz drowned out the sound of her words in my head. "Yeah," I muttered, eyes fixed on the blinking light of the phone. Family helps family. The words came out flat, dead calm. That was the night something in me shut off for good. And whatever came next, my family had it coming. I grew up on the north side of Milwaukee in a neighborhood full of loud engines and louder families. My dad worked construction. My mom sold houses part-time, and my younger brother, Ryan, was the golden boy. At 15, I spent my afternoons at Tommy's Auto, sweeping floors and learning engines. I liked the smell of oil and metal. It made sense to me. Ryan spent his afternoons at baseball practice. Mom and Dad sat in the front row of every game wearing jackets with his name on the back. When I rebuilt an old Ford Ranger out of scrap parts, Dad called it junk. When Ryan got a new Jeep, they called it a reward for hard work. That was the pattern. Ryan got praise, I got expectations. At 18, I enlisted in the Marines. It wasn't patriotism, it was escape. I wanted structure and distance. Mom cried when I left, but when Ryan moved into his first dorm, she threw a cookout. 4 years later, I came back with a duffel bag, a bad knee, and no plan. Ryan had already flunked out twice and was finding himself. I went back to work at a garage and saved every dollar. By 27, I opened Iron Ridge Garage. 2 bays, 1 lift, and a beat-up coffee maker. I built it from the ground up. Fair prices, clean work, no shortcuts. That's when my parents came around again. Dad had a heart scare and spent a week in the hospital. Mom asked me to help set up something for emergencies. She said, "You've always been responsible, Jack, just in case something happens again." I opened a savings account, family emergency fund. I was the primary name. They were secondary. I was the only one who ever deposited. They never put in $1. I put in $500 a month. They promised it was for medical use only. 2 months later, Ryan called about a business opportunity. Something about importing gym equipment. He needed $3,000 just for shipping. I sent it. He said he'd double it in 6 weeks. I never saw a dime. That became the rhythm. Ryan made messes. My parents made excuses. I cleaned it up. When I said no, Mom said, "He's your brother." Dad said, "You make more than we ever did." Over the next decade, I paid Ryan's debts, covered his credit cards, bailed him out of a parking arrest, and even co-signed his second apartment. Each time, Mom swore it was the last. Each time, it wasn't. Meanwhile, Ryan's projects got bigger and dumber. A clothing brand called Alpha Hustle that folded before launch. A crypto fitness app that never existed outside a website mock-up. A luxury car rental startup that used my truck as its only vehicle. Every failure ended the same way, a phone call from Mom crying, "He just needs a little help, Jack." By the time Luke was 5, I'd given away close to $50,000. I kept track because I had to for taxes, not because I ever expected it back. It wasn't generosity anymore. It was habit. At the shop, I worked long hours. My employees respected me. I didn't yell. I didn't miss deadlines. People trusted me to fix their problems. And maybe that's why I couldn't stop fixing my family's. Then one morning, Elena, one of my regular customers, stopped by. She ran a catering company and always brought coffee when she dropped off her van. "You ever stop carrying everyone else's weight?" she asked while I tightened her oil pan. I looked up. "Somebody has to keep the wheels turning." She smiled. "Not if you're the one they're running over." I didn't say anything, but the words hit. That same week, Mom walked into the garage without warning. She wore big sunglasses and perfume strong enough to choke the air. "Ryan's in trouble again," she said. "His investor backed out. He just needs a few thousand to hold him over." I wiped my hands on a rag. "You know I've got bills too, right? Luke's school, the house, payroll." She sighed, shaking her head. "You've always been good with money. Don't make your brother feel small." When she left, I stood in the doorway watching her car drive off, the smell of her perfume still hanging in the air. That night after closing, I sat at the counter with a cold beer and opened my laptop. I checked the family account. 10 years of deposits every month like clockwork. It had grown into something substantial, enough to buy new lifts for the shop or put away for Luke's college. But I knew if I stopped, Mom would call within the hour asking why. I closed the laptop instead. The next morning, Ryan posted a video on social media bragging about his new business partnership. He stood in front of a rented Lamborghini talking about ambition and loyalty. I didn't even feel angry, just tired. A week later, he texted, "Need a quick 2,000, big deal closing soon, promise I'll square up." I didn't respond. That evening, Elena came by again to pick up her van. She looked at the spotless garage, the neat tool wall, the calendar filled with client names. "You built this by yourself?" she asked. "Every bolt," I said. She smiled. "Then maybe it's time you stop letting people tear it down." I watched her drive off, thinking about her words. The garage lights buzzed overhead. I grabbed my jacket and looked back one last time before locking up. Everything in that shop was earned. Every tool, every hour, every scar, and deep down I knew the next time they came for help, something was going to break. It was close to midnight. The garage was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock and the hum of the lights. Luke was asleep on the old couch in the office, wrapped in his dinosaur blanket. I was finishing payroll at my desk, the same routine every Thursday. The smell of oil, metal, and burnt coffee filled the air. I logged into my accounts to transfer supplier payments. Out of habit, I clicked on the family emergency fund, the one I'd been paying into for years. I hadn't checked it in months. The balance didn't look right. It was too low. I opened the transaction history. Lines of withdrawals stared back at me. $400, $600, $200, all recent, each labeled with vague notes. Family trip, hotel booking, Vegas deposit, the last one hit like a hammer. $3,000, Vegas deposit. I stared at the screen, jaw tightening. I scrolled through the dates. The withdrawals started 2 weeks before Luke's surgery. They hadn't even waited for me to blink before dipping into it. The blood in my ears roared. I rubbed my hands over my face, tried to breathe, but the anger burned clean. This wasn't an accident. It was theft dressed as family. I grabbed my phone and called Frank Delgado, my old Marine buddy turned bank manager. He answered on the second ring. "Jack, you know what time it is? Lock the account to the primary only," I said. "Remove all secondary users and restrict withdrawals to the primary." He paused. "That's the one with your parents." "Yeah, Jack, that's going to light a fire." "Good," I said. "Let it burn." Frank exhaled through the receiver. "All right, I'll flag it and lock withdrawals. You're still primary, so it's legal. Want me to send a verification notice? Send it to me only." I hung up. Frank did it while we were on the phone. Once the changes took effect, I transferred my contributions into a 529 college plan in Luke's name, with me as custodian. No one could touch it without tuition proof. Then I opened Ryan's contact and sent a $1 transfer with the memo. Buy your own beer. That small click felt better than any punch I'd ever thrown. I wiped my hands on a rag, then looked at myself in the shop mirror. Grease smudged on my cheek, eyes bloodshot, a faint grin forming. They built the leash, I said quietly. I just cut it. Outside, the street was empty. I turned off the lights and stood for a moment in the doorway. The night was cold and sharp. For the first time in years, it felt like breathing clean air. I locked up and drove home. Luke stirred when I carried him from the truck to his bed. "You okay, Dad?" he mumbled. "I'm fine, buddy. Go back to sleep." The next morning started with chaos. My phone lit up before sunrise. 43 missed calls, 17 texts, and 1 voicemail from Mom. I hit play on speaker as I made coffee. Her voice cracked between sobs. "Jack, how could you do this to us? Your father tried to pay a bill and the bank said the account's frozen. What is going on? You've broken this family's trust." Another message came from Ryan. "Real mature, bro. You always got to play the hero. Vegas deposit was part of a group trip. Don't ruin this for everyone." Dad's text followed. "You're out of line. We'll talk when you calm down." I didn't reply to any of them. I sat at the kitchen table sipping my coffee, scrolling through their words. Each message felt smaller than the last. Childish, desperate, entitled. By the time Luke came into the kitchen rubbing his eyes, I deleted all their numbers except Frank's. "Morning," he said sleepily. "Morning, champ. Pancakes?" He grinned and nodded. I made breakfast same as always, pretending it was a normal day. But inside, something had shifted. At the garage, Mason noticed at first. He saw the tightness in my shoulders as I checked the morning orders. "You good, boss?" "Better than I've been in a long time," I said. He raised an eyebrow but didn't push. The day passed smooth. Customers came and went, the smell of rubber and oil filling the air. By evening, I was under a lifted Dodge, tightening bolts when my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Mom. I ignored it. Instead, I looked around the garage. Every inch of it, every tool, every piece of equipment was mine. Earned, paid for, controlled. For years, I'd worked like a machine while they took freely, assuming I'd never draw a line. Now that line was burned into concrete. When I finally checked the voicemail later, Mom's tone had changed from tears to anger. "You've embarrassed your father. Ryan's furious. I don't know what's gotten into you, Jack. But this isn't how family behaves." I played it twice just to be sure I heard it right. "Family behaves," I muttered. I deleted the message and turned off my phone. That night, after closing up, I stood in the quiet garage again. Luke's drawings were taped to the office wall. Crayon cars and crooked stick figures labeled Dad. I looked at them, then at the locked tool chest beside my desk. It hit me that my family had never respected the man I became. They only respected what they could take. That ended tonight. I grabbed a rag, wiped my hands, and flipped the sign on the door to closed. The sleeping giant had just woken up. You saw. By the next week, the situation was already spiraling. Mom started it. She posted a long Facebook rant with a smiling photo of her and Dad at brunch. The caption read, "Some people forget who raised them once they have a little money." No names, but everyone in town knew who she meant. The comments filled with sympathy from her church friends. Little hearts, praying emojis, and "You raised them too well, Martha." Dad took it further. He called Sarah, my ex-wife. She answered because he still babysat Luke sometimes. He told her I was acting unstable. Said I'd cut off the family out of nowhere and might not be in a good place for full custody. Sarah called me that night, voice tight. "Jack, your dad said some things. Should I be worried?" "You've known me 10 years, I said. You ever seen me lose control? No, she admitted. Just wanted to hear it from you. Next time he calls, hang up. I ended the call and stared at my reflection in the dark window of the kitchen, calm, focused, unmoved. Then Ryan decided to make it public. I was under a lifted Chevy when Mason called from the front bay. Boss, you better see this. I slid out from under the truck. Ryan stood on the sidewalk outside the garage, phone held high, live streaming to an audience. His voice echoed off the metal walls. My psycho brother stole from our parents, he shouted. Lock them out of their own money. He's a control freak who thinks he's better than everyone. Customers in the waiting area froze. A few even stepped outside to watch. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked straight out. Ryan didn't see me until I was 3 feet away. Jack, don't, Mason called, but I didn't stop. Ryan's smile faltered, but the phone stayed aimed at my face. Say hi to the internet, hero, he said. Tell everyone why you robbed Mom and Dad. I grabbed his wrist and yanked him forward, the phone clattering to the ground. Then I grabbed his collar and slammed him against the fender of the nearest car. Grease streaked across his shirt. Stream this too, I growled. He tried to shove me, but I pressed him harder into the metal until he stopped struggling. His eyes went wide. Listen carefully, I said, low enough that only he could hear. You show up here again, you leave in an ambulance. Then I dropped him and tossed his phone into the nearest oil pan. It splashed black sludge across his jeans. Mason stepped forward, voice calm. Ryan, you heard the man, time to go. Ryan backed off, covered in grease. His live feed still streaming from the oil pan, the screen glowing under a skin of 10W30. He pointed at me, shaking. You'll regret this. Then he stumbled off down the sidewalk. Inside, customers pretended not to have seen anything. Mason locked the door behind us. He waited until I washed the grease off my hands before speaking. You start a war, finish it clean, he said quietly. I nodded. Already started. After closing, I called Frank Delgato at the bank. I want every connection between me and them gone, I said. He sighed. I figured this was coming. I'll remove their names from any joint access and shut down their permissions. Make it official. And Frank, thank you always, brother, he said, Semper Fi. Every tie was severed. The emergency account was gone. All their backup authorizations revoked. Around 9, I sat at the desk in my office. The family group chat was still pinned to the top of my phone. Mom, Dad, Ryan. I scrolled through the old messages. Birthdays I paid for, repairs I did for free. The same line repeated dozens of times. You're the dependable one, Jack. I took a lighter from my drawer, tore the page with their numbers written on it, and dropped it into an ashtray. The flame burned bright for a moment, curling the paper inward until it was black dust. Mason poked his head in from the bay. You good? Yeah, I said, better than ever. He nodded once, then left me alone. I leaned back, watching the smoke drift from the ashtray. The sound of rain started tapping against the roof, mixing with the faint hum of the shop lights. That night wasn't rage. It was clarity. No more excuses, no more guilt, just clean lines and locked doors. By the time I shut off the lights and walked out, the garage was dark and slant. I glanced once at the oil-stained spot where Ryan had stood earlier. The switch had flipped. From here on, I wasn't fixing their messes anymore. I was finishing them. One day, my mom called. She said, "Family talk." The invitation was polite enough. No accusations, just a time and place. I knew better, but I went. Mason rode with me and waited in the truck, hands folded across his chest like a sentry. The yard smelled of charcoal and cheap beer. A string of patio lights buzzed over a folding table loaded with plastic cups and a half-eaten tray of burgers. Ryan stood near the grill wearing sunglasses at dusk, beer in hand, doing that practice swagger like he was on camera. Mia, Ryan's fiancée, hovered by the porch, uncomfortable. Mom wiped her eyes with a napkin. Dad sat back in the lawn chair with his jaw tight. They opened with small talk until it fell apart. Mom's voice trembled first. "We just want peace," she said, voice full of practiced hurt. Dad's face went flat. "Unfreeze the account, Jack. Put it back the way it was." I pulled a folder from the truck under my arm and set it on the table with a dry slap. Papers fanned out like receipts for a decade. I didn't look up. "Here," I said, "this is what peace looked like from my side." I dragged the top sheet forward. Bank statements, wire confirmations, dates, and memos. The numbers stared up like a verdict. $52,000. They stared back like they'd never seen numbers before. "That's 10 years of me paying for your bad decisions," I said. Ryan laughed, too loud. "Big hero counting pennies." "I owe my kid, not leeches," I answered. That set him off. He slammed his beer down hard enough to tip the cup and send a spray of foam across the table. Bottles toppled. A chair clattered. "Say that again!" he shouted. "You heard me," I said. He shoved the table forward. It moved a foot and screeched across the patio. I didn't flinch. He shoved me hard, chest to chest. I stepped back once, hands open, the move of a man who's given a beating long thought through. Ryan swung. It was a wild, sloppy right that clipped my jaw and stung. The instant it landed, the whole yard changed. The argument turned physical, like dropping a socket into a running engine. He went for another. I caught his wrist mid-swing, thumb pressed into the tendon, the motion locked like catching a hammer. With my other hand, I seized his collar and drove him backward into the side of the metal grill. It skidded and rattled against the patio. Grease hissed on the hot plate. Ryan thrashed. He swung again, reckless, eyes full of fear and fury. I blocked and used his momentum. I twisted his arm, stepped inside his swing, and flipped him over a bench. He hit concrete hard. Wind left him for a second. I put a knee across his chest, pinned him flat. He kicked once like an animal. Then he stopped. The yard went quiet except for the high hiss of the knocked-over grill and the shallow rasp of his breath. "If I wanted to hurt you, you'd already be unconscious," I said, low enough that people had to lean in to hear. My voice was flat, my pulse steady. He gasped and tried to talk, but the words came out small and thin. Mia screamed, "You told me he stole from you!" Her face went white. She didn't defend him. She fled toward the car, shoes scraping on the driveway. Dad pushed forward like he might step between us. He opened his mouth to say something sharp, but Mason was already behind him, arms folded, a silent wall. Dad stepped back, the defiance gone from his stance. Mom stood there with her napkin, helpless and furious at the same time. She started shouting, "Accusations, please!" Words that sounded thin and rehearsed. I pulled my knee up, slapped dust off my jeans, and dropped the folder back on the table. I gripped their spare Honda keys, the set they'd made me hold just in case, and tossed them across the lawn. They hit the grass and rolled to a stop by the cracked bird bath. "Find another mechanic," I said. "I'm done keeping your engines running." Mom's shriek drowned for a moment in the hum of the patio lights. Ryan spat a curse from the ground and tried to push himself up, but he was dazed and humiliated more than hurt. He scrambled to his feet, shoved his shirt back into place, and staggered toward the driveway, rage and shame scrabbling in his eyes. "You raised a coward," I told my mother as she stood there wet-faced and furious. "And you blame me for cleaning up after him?" I turned without looking back. The walk to the truck was short, the gravel crunching under my boots. Mason climbed in beside me without a word and closed the door. "Feel better?" he asked as I started the engine. I wiped a line of blood from my lip with the heel of my hand and tasted iron. "No," I said, "but I feel free." The truck rolled away from the house. Behind us, a family argued into the night, voices high and raw. In the mirror, I watched Ryan on the porch, surrounded by scattered napkins and overturned cups, spending his last dignity the way he always had, on anger and excuses. The keys lay where they landed. The folder sat on the table. The yard smelled of charcoal and oil and something else, endings, and by morning, the edited video was everywhere. Ryan's live stream only showed the end of the fight. Him on the ground, me standing over him, blood on my lip. No sound, no context. The caption read, "Veteran attacks brother over family money." Mom shared it on Facebook with, "Please pray for our family. Some people lose control." Dad commented, "We tried to help him." I didn't respond. I drove straight to the police station. Mason Road shotgun. I brought dash cam and shop CCTV. Frank added notarized bank statements. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and paper. "I'm here to file an assault report," I said. A detective brought me into a small room. I set the folder on the table and hit play on the video. The footage showed Ryan shoving me, throwing the first punch, me backing off, then restraining him when he went for another. The detective watched twice before speaking. "This lines up with statements from the neighbors," he said. "You're in the clear. You want to press charges?" "No, just want the record straight." He nodded, filled out the report, and handed me a copy. "You did the right thing coming in first." Back outside, Mason smirked. "Handled clean. Let's see them spin that." A few days later, a courier dropped off a thick envelope at the garage. A civil lawsuit. Ryan and my parents were suing me for conversion of funds and emotional distress. I called Elena. She didn't even sound surprised. "I've got someone for you," she said. "Carmen Vega, former JA lawyer, doesn't flinch." I met Carmen that afternoon, mid-30s, sharp suit, quiet confidence. She flipped through the complaint, then laughed once, short and cold. "They're bluffing," she said. "You were the only contributor to that account. We'll bury them in receipts." She started writing motions right there at her desk. "We'll counter-sue for defamation and harassment. They'll wish they'd stayed quiet." I signed her retainer without hesitation. That night, Dad made his next move. He called Sarah, my ex-wife, and told her I'd been charged with assault and was under investigation for theft. When I picked up Luke the next morning, Sarah's tone was careful. "Your dad called. Is there something I should know?" "There's a report," I said, filed by me. "Want to see it?" I texted her the official police document. She read it in silence, then nodded. "That's what I thought. He's manipulating again." Carmen added the police report and bank records to our existing custody file and notified the court so nothing could be twisted. "They won't get near your kid," she told me. "We're locking this down." By the weekend, my family's lawyer was feeding stories to blogs. Brother sues decorated veteran over missing funds. The goal was obvious: ruin my reputation before the hearing. Elena refused to let that stand. "We're flipping the narrative," she said. "I booked you on a morning radio show. Talk about your charity rebuild for veterans." I went on air the next day. The host asked about the garage, the new apprenticeship program, and how Luke was doing. I kept it short and steady, no drama, just the truth. By the end of the week, the story had changed. Comments flooded in from old customers and neighbors. "That man fixed my car for free when I lost my job. He's always been solid." Business doubled. The phone rang non-stop. Meanwhile, Carmen was dismantling their case piece by piece. She subpoenaed the full bank logs. The printouts showed a dozen unauthorized withdrawals from the emergency account, all using Ryan's card. One was labeled Vegas Deposit. Weeks later, at deposition, Carmen slid the papers across the table. Ryan's lawyer pad. Then came Mia's testimony. She showed up nervous, glancing at Ryan like she wanted to disappear. Carmen's tone stayed calm. "Miss Collins, did Ryan ever tell you where the money came from?" Mia hesitated, then said quietly, "He said it was his brother's cash, that Jack didn't care." You could hear the air leave the room. Carmen closed the folder. No further questions. The lie collapsed. After a motions hearing and a round of filings, the judge reviewed everything. Videos, statements, bank logs. My family sat on one side, their lawyer whispering frantically. When the judge spoke, the room went dead silent. "This court finds no basis in fact or law for these claims," he said. "Evidence shows Mr. Raines acted in self-defense and was the sole contributor to the disputed funds. The case is dismissed with prejudice." Mom covered her face. Dad stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Ryan's hands shook on the table. Carmen nodded once. All over but the paperwork, she whispered. Outside the courthouse, sunlight hit hard and clean. Reporters waited by the steps, shouting questions. I didn't stop. Ryan tried to glare as I passed. Mia stood near the curb, eyes down, waiting for a cab. She didn't look back at him. 3 days later, Mason handed me the newspaper. The headline read, "Family's lawsuit dismissed. Video clears local mechanic." Ryan lost his job that same week. Mia left him publicly posting, "Loyalty doesn't mean lying for someone who uses you." Mom posted another rant online. Long rambling, blaming fake evidence and outsiders. But the comment section turned on her. "Maybe your son finally had enough," one woman wrote. Frank stopped by the garage that evening. We drank burnt coffee in the break room. The hum of air compressors steady in the background. "You didn't win by hitting back harder," he said. "You won by thinking 2 steps ahead." I nodded. "That's what Marines do. You're clear now. Let them eat their own mess." Outside, the evening air smelled of motor oil and summer rain. Luke laughed somewhere behind me, chasing Mason's dog around the lot. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe. No guilt, no weight, no leash. The war was over, and this time I hadn't needed to throw a single punch to win. 6 months later, the world finally felt quiet. The lawsuits, the noise, the gossip, it all burned out. What was left was clean steel, hard work, and peace. Iron Ridge Garage had doubled in size. I opened a second location 2 towns over with Mason as my official partner. His name looked good next to mine on the sign. Rains and Cole Automotive. The new bays gleamed with fresh paint and new lifts. I still worked the front line. Grease on my hands, sleeves rolled up. Business was steady, loyal, and honest the way it should have always been. Luke spent weekends at the shop, sweeping floors, cleaning parts, and calling himself junior foreman. He wore his little Iron Ridge cap like a crown. His grades were up, his laugh louder, and sometimes I'd catch him staring at the framed newspaper clipping about the lawsuit, grinning like he knew exactly what it meant. Elena was part of everything now. She ran the numbers, kept the books clean, handled customers, and kept me grounded when the work piled up. She didn't fix me. She just gave me the space to fix myself. The chaos was gone. The sharp edges had softened. Life finally had balance. My family stayed silent. Mom and Dad sold their house and moved north to some small town near the border. Ryan skipped state completely, working odd jobs under fake names. No calls, no visits, just distance, and that was fine by me. One morning, a letter showed up at the shop. Mom's handwriting. The return address said Green Bay. I turned it over in my hands a few times before opening it. "We never meant to hurt you," it read. "Families make mistakes. Maybe one day you'll understand that." No apology, just another excuse wrapped in guilt. I folded it twice and tossed it in the trash. Later that afternoon, I framed a crisp $1 bill and hung it above my desk. Below it, a small brass plate read, "Debt paid." Customers sometimes asked about it. I'd just smile and say, "A reminder to close accounts when they're settled." Spring came around, and with it, Little League. Same field where everything started. Luke at bat, sun bright on the fence. I stood behind the chain link with Elena and Mason. Cat pulled low, arms crossed. The pitch came fast. Luke swung and the crack echoed across the field. The ball sailed over center field deep into the grass. The crowd went wild. I shouted louder than anyone. Mason filmed the whole thing, laughing. Elena clapped until her hands were red. Luke rounded the bases, beaming. For the first time, I looked around the bleachers. No old faces, no ghosts from before, just real people, neighbors, friends, co-workers, people who showed up because they cared, not because they wanted something. The noise from the stands felt different this time. Real. When Luke crossed home plate, he pointed at me, grinning ear to ear. I nodded once. That was enough. Back at the garage, the rhythm of life felt right. Elena and I launched a veteran apprenticeship program, a training space built into the new shop. We brought in returning service members, taught them how to rebuild engines, manage inventory, and run their own businesses. Every morning, the shop came alive with laughter, the clank of tools and old rock songs from a dusty radio, the smell of oil and coffee mixed with something stronger: purpose. One afternoon, Mason leaned on the hood of a car watching the apprentices work. "You finally building something that doesn't break," he said. I tightened a bolt and smirked. Not this time. That night, the garage was quiet except for the hum of the neon sign outside. I wiped my hands and looked around. The framed dollar above my desk, Luke's crayon drawings taped beside it, stick figures labeled "Me and Dad." I took a slow breath. They thought cutting me down would keep me small, I said under my breath. Turns out they just cleared the ground for something stronger. I shut off the lights and stepped into the cool night air.